you, Jim, for volunteering to speak for us again. And this time is about your second book. So we're so anxious that to hear about it. And Jim is, he's just that, I can't say enough about Jim. He's very informative, and he's spoken for the IANDS conference not too long ago. You've come a long way, Jim. Thank you for that. And we want to hear about your new book. So with that, please welcome and begin your story, please.
Thank you, Tina, and nice to see everyone. Yeah, my NDE occurred on October 6th in 2016. It's just over 5 years ago, and it took a little while in recuperating at home to realize it was a near-death experience I had. I knew it was an out-of-body experience, but I don't think I was as conversant with it being a near-death experience. And so I found the IANDS website, read everything that was there, started downloading books to drive around and listen to, and eventually found my way to the Farmington group, Tina and Jack, Sue, and everyone. So from there, I just came and listened and was really quiet a few times. And then finally, I think maybe Jack or Tina said, does anyone want to talk about their near-death experience? And I raised my hand, and here we are. And that was, I think, back in July of 2018. So it was almost 2 years before I really publicly spoke of it. Anyway, a year later, next thing I know, I'm submitting a paper to the IANDS National Conference, the last one we had in person, which was down in King of Prussia, Pennsylvania, over Labor Day in 2019. And so I went down there and shared my experience there, got to meet up with some friends, make some new ones. Jack was there with me. And 3 months after that, I had my first book written, and then, it was in editing, and then it came out in May of 2020. And that was this book here. That's a picture of me walking in Africa, where I used to live, 300 miles from anyone. And it just seemed like a really kind of poignant photo to a story that's really about a journey, right? And the first book was sort of your classic format, life before my NDE, and what led up to it. And then the kind of the scratching of the head that comes after, saying, okay, what do I do with all this? And so that was the first book. And then as I continued to share my story with podcast interviews or writing or speaking, people started saying, well, how do we put some of this into practice, things that you've learned or were shared with you? So I thought about that for a little while. And then just about a year ago, I started on my second book, and that one is called The Practice in Between, The Art of Letting Go. And that photo is only about a mile away. I didn't have to go all the way to Africa to get that. And it's actually the back of the Timex Global headquarters. It's on farmland. And so that's the book we're going to talk about this evening. So in that, people were asking, okay, so how do we put this into practice? I kept coming back to one of the central themes that came out of my near-death experience, including when I was recuperating in the hospital after my plane crash. And it was really about the art of letting go. At one time, and I'll share how this came to be in a moment, but at one time I was told, always live life in celebration of the individual spirit, that no one can stand before the brilliance of a truly naked soul, and that all the force of will you'll ever need is found in the art of letting go. And so that went really deep, and then it was demonstrated to me right there in the hospital. And I said, okay, you've got my attention now. And so it's interesting, especially if you read Eastern texts, it is a lot about letting go, or it may say the word surrender, but it's defined as letting go. Just don't hold on to anything, because none of this is us, and everything is very ephemeral. And even in the Bible, where it says, be still and know that I am God, the more accurate translation would be, let go and know that I am God. So these were all the little things that were coming up to really get my attention about it. And so that's why I included it in the title of the book. Because for me, I think all of all of my truths now, in every way I'm living my life, which almost sometimes doesn't seem that I'm living it according to a choice. I'm just living according to what just happens. You know, it's natural to be this way. Seems to be around letting go. And so what I thought I would do this evening is pull what I could say are 5 truths, if you will, from my book that have impacted my life and share those with you. And again, like Bethany and Tina said, we can ask and answer questions along the way. You don't have to wait till the end, because it may be that some of what I'm saying is kind of dense or it's ambiguous, which is actually part of part of the story as well. So of the 5 truths, I'd say the first one really begins with, you know, the return, coming out of my NDE in the hospital and asking this question of what is the best version of myself. And then the second is, what is the art of letting go? You know, what do we mean by that? And then how that led to an interesting awareness of how to look at life, how to approach problems from both a linear and a non-linear way of thinking, and how there are advantages. I guess you could say there are advantages to both, but especially to the non-linear approach. And then on being authentic, and there I call it, you know, being authentic, even atheists can be spiritual. And then the last one is just basically letting go itself. So I was going to run through these, and like I say, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to put your hand up or type in a question. I'll take it right then and there. Okay, so again, October 6th, I was test flying an experimental aircraft, and I lost my engine, and I crashed into the woods just north of Waterbury. And luckily, there was a man fishing there. Because the park was closed, the Boy Scout camp was closed, I crashed into, ruining his peace and quiet. But he did call 911. They brought a helicopter in for me and took me up to Hartford. And again, as I always say, I can't say enough that's good about the Hartford Trauma Center and the team. They were amazing. So they took me right into surgery. I escaped the restraints. They said that I had multiple 6-hour operations coming up over, you know, a week. And they told my wife that they could lose me at any time, as some of these operations only had a 2% chance of success. I broke all my ribs, ruptured both lungs, had a hole in my lower back. My chin was all torn up. And as I often say, other than that, I was fine. And so they put me into a coma for a week. And again, it's anybody's guess. But it's reasonable, I think, to say that when they put me into a coma here, that's when I had my near-death experience. And it was really all about stacking the deck, removing potentially bad choices in my future, so that bad choices being defined as to my spiritual detriment. So that in sort of stacking the deck and smoothing the way, it would hopefully expedite my path to being a better person, a more spiritual person. And that's the life I'm living now, I believe. So again, as I wake up in the hospital and start to have a functioning mind and any functioning memory, which I'd say was about a week after I came out of the coma and my NDE, this incredibly lucid experience is bookended with 2 periods of amnesia, which I kind of find to be interesting. Anyway, as I wake up in the rehab hospital, the integration, I would say, of my NDE started right then and there. I realized, because I was already seeing how I was feeling differently about things and how I was reacting differently to things. I mean, we could certainly say that some of that would be the result of painkillers and drugs that put you into comas and painkillers, you know, just things like this. But I became aware also that it just continued on past that. And it really did seem to be a function of my near-death experience. One morning I woke up to find this photo of me taped to the wall that my wife had put there. And it was a photo of when I was over in Afghanistan running guns for the military, standing with 2 tribesmen of the Northern Alliance, smoking these like $25 Cuban cigars, which to them was like a month's salary. And one of them's got a huge belt of 12 millimeter machine gun bullets around him that I brought in from Tajikistan. And like, it's this perfect Match.com photo. You know, you're standing there looking like a manly man smoking a cigar with these tribal people. So she put that up there because she was thinking, okay, this is the best version of you. This is the person I want you to heal back to being. And I looked at the photo and reflected on how many lifetimes ago that already was. You know, to those who knew me, yeah, that was probably the best version of myself. But over the next few days, I began to feel differently about the man in the picture, especially as people would come in and see it and ask about it. And I, you know, kept basically telling the same story over and over. Instinctively, I was coming to see that my best version was not that guy in the photo, but it was the depersonalized, conscious being in the in-between within my near-death experience who was stripped of everything. When I was over there, I had no memory of this place whatsoever. If someone had come up to me and said, if you stay here longer, you can't go back, I'd say, go back where? To your family. What family? I was really in the moment so much that I had no memory of anything behind me or any anticipation of anything in front of me. And I just had no sense of, I mean, if you'd asked me what my name was, I wouldn't have known. I mean, it really was like I was depersonalized down to zero, just this conscious observer being. And we've all heard about that in different traditions in terms of splitting off, and you have the active mind that works in the world, and you have the observer mind. So this was like the observer mind, I guess. Anyway, knowing neither joy or sorrow, just flowing in that now beyond time, I was in this state of letting go. And so lying there in the hospital, trying to come to grips with my NDE, my mind suddenly began conversing with the in-between, which is where I was told I was during my near-death experience. And I would say before my crash, you know, having a kind of stressful job as an IT project manager for 4 state universities and 12 community colleges here in Connecticut, you know, I might come home all stressed. So I might pour myself a rum and Coke. And if it was nice, I might have 2 or 3 more. And so, you know, I wouldn't say it's a good habit. I don't think I was overly abusive of it, but it was definitely my go-to when I was stressed. So while I was laying there in the hospital bed, the in-between actually, it's as if it pulled out of me the representation of alcohol. And it said, what did I want to do with this? Did I want to take it with me, meaning carry it forward into my life? Or did I want to leave it behind and never have it again? It took about a split second to say, leave it behind. And I said, okay. It said, if you want to take it with you, I will carry it for you. If you want to leave it behind, I will remove all attachment to it. It'll be as if you've never had it and it has no pull on you. And I said, well, again, look, I'm happy to leave it behind. And the voice said, all right. And that representation literally just evaporated from sight. I haven't had another drink since, not inclined to. I can go into a liquor store, I could buy a bottle of wine on the way to a dinner party, or I can sit in a bar with people who are talking and alcohol is flowing. I don't even think of it. I'm also a vegetarian. I've been one for 44 years. Eating meat is something other people do. Drinking alcohol is something other people do. And so to me, this was my first taste on the power of letting go and what that could be like. So that kind of takes me into my second truth. You know, what is this art of letting go? And I think one way I came to it, and I think part of it was after my NDE, but especially, you know, around the time of COVID when people are, I guess, sitting in front of the television. And so you're getting hit with more commercials than you're used to. It just seemed like everybody's always chasing the next big thing, you know? And so I said, while the world chases the next big thing, what if we try a different approach? You know, this next big thing is always meant to give you more free time, or it's meant to increase your wealth. It's meant to make you more beautiful, more handsome, stronger, faster, make your kids do better in school or something like that. It's always this thing that is just out of our reach, and that we need this methodology to help us have this complete life that we're fantasizing about, right? But as I've seen, so often the purveyors of this one next thing, this next big thing, are the only ones who really profit by it. The people who adopt their method and chase it rarely do. In fact, I'd say that a lot of times you'll hear people swapping stories of how they know someone who knows someone who's heard of someone else who made it. And that's about as close as it gets. So to me, life wasn't really about chasing the next big thing. It was about letting go. So and the funny thing is, if you look the phrase up, the art of letting go, it pretty much, you'll find that it's the art of doing something so ephemeral as nothing. And that's exactly what it is. It's about detachment, of owning your power to make good choices moment by moment that reduce the number of bad potential choices and their outcomes, just like what I was doing and given the opportunity to do within my near-death experience. And it's also about realizing that power within you. It's an understanding that has no context. It's simply a state of knowing, and it gives rise to meaning, and meaning backs into our individual lives to give us a sense of our unique purpose. So that's the answer when people say, what's the purpose of life? I generally start by saying, well, let's start with what the meaning of life is, because that's a much more universal answer. The purpose of life is specific to us all. And so I just talk about, again, how to look at your unique talents and your unique abilities. So anyway, this detachment to me helps with that depersonalizing process of removing yourself from the equation, from the content of the processes flowing around you. You're not the center of any particular universe. And once you understand that, you see little of what anyone has anything to do with you personally. And you realize that the tip of an iceberg is what we see, but our appreciation of it is hidden, from the 90% we cannot see. And that's pretty much how it is in dealing with most people. If people were, if someone's nice to you, chances are they were nice last week. And if they're mean to you, chances are they'll be mean to somebody else 2 weeks from now when, somebody gets in their way or slows them down in traffic or in any other way frustrates them. But it really doesn't have much to do with you. And this also brought up the concept of the dual mind, how we think in terms of this or that. So we argue and struggle to reconcile those polarities. And right now we see it all over social media. Who's vaccinated, who's not vaccinated, who's left, who's right. It just never stops. And what it is, like I said, we struggle to reconcile those polarities. And yet meditation and open-mindedness, communication, not just compliance, can lead to a non-dual state of mind where we think in terms of and instead of or. And that simple change in perspective can change the world in terms of thinking us and them instead of us or them. And Taoism, for example, represents the polarities of yin and yang with a complement of each as a seed of its opposite within. And this is, I think, important to remember. So to let go, my take on it was to just start by allowing choices to unfold naturally and to wait as long as you can before choosing to allow all the other possibilities to fully mature. One of the practical advantages is this allows for the arrival of new information that might impact your decision. But with your stillness, you create this vacuum. And we've all heard how nature abhors a vacuum and will try to fill it. If you put your hand in a tub full of water and you move it, it doesn't take long to fill in. So think of it like that. And so in creating that vacuum, you learn in your meditation, which is creating that vacuum, then how to release it in a chosen direction. And that can be one more of intention than desire. Intention meaning this is a direction it would be good to see emergence occur, like to see good things happen for other people, for example, versus a desire which has an attachment, like I want a new car, So with your stillness, you can create that vacuum, release it in the direction you want. And then when that is done and you're still and present, you'll know exactly how you feel about these choices. And that's what we need to be in contact with, because logic tells us what should be correct, but emotions tell us what's important. And so know what it is you need, and that creates the vacuum. Aim it with your intention, and like an archer, release it and think no more of it, or you'll no longer be present. Let the arrow travel to the target on its own. Shooting a bow and arrow is one thing. Being concerned about winning is an entirely different game, is an entirely different experience. So shoot because you love shooting at the target, and the outcome or winning the prize, like I said, it's a totally different thing, and it can distract you from shooting perfectly. You have to choose between the process of shooting the bow for joy and the content of winning the prize. Just focus on shooting and the outcome will take care of itself. It's the same thing when we spin off our good intentions and we're practicing what so many people call the law of attraction or prosperity consciousness, or just how to draw things to yourself that you need or you want. Anyway, let go of the outcomes. You don't have to see or know all the possible choices you can make in the future. You might not even know what they are. All you need to know is whether they feel neutral or good or bad. They feel bad if they run counter to your values and your emotions, then dismiss them. To do that, you have to be honest with yourself, warts and all. And spiritual studies and quantum physics state that every moment is infinite with probabilities stacked on top of each other. And our conscious decisions continually collapse one of them into defining our present reality. And it's our still point of meditation, in that crossroads of all decisions, that nexus of all probabilities, that we realize we're in the center of all these possibilities. And in a way, another analogy is kind of like standing in a river, just letting the current and whatever it carries go around you without grabbing onto anything. If you create the right meditation space in which to simply breathe, you'll naturally become more and more contemplative like this. It doesn't become something you do, but someone you are. And this is how you pray without ceasing. Another perspective is that when you live life as a question, you no longer seek answers. You seek awakening. Because answers are kind of a one-shot deal. Who robbed the bank? Or, who's that person? Or where am I going today? But awakening is the understanding behind the question that drove the question to be here in the first place. And that can last a lifetime. Some things then, as you take up this path and you practice this, some things just naturally fall away. And they can only be expressed in this plane. If these desires can only be expressed in this plane, then as they fall away, so do our attachments holding us here. And if you can find a community or even a teacher you resonate with, then you can test this. In their company over time, do you perceive a change in how you think and feel about things? If the familiar attachments surface in your mind less and less, you may want to spend more time around these people. It may not be so much what they say or do. It's more like when one tuning fork is put near another one that is of the same frequency, and that first one is vibrating, the second one just starts vibrating. Well, how much effort was required for that? Nothing. That's how I believe spirituality is. I think it's how chemistry between people is. It's just by finding the right people for where you're at in life, who resonate at that same frequency. You just have this attraction to each other, to be in each other's space simply because of how you feel. Not too many people say, I like being with you because of the way you make me think. Most of us say, I like being with you because of the way you make me feel. And again, that goes back to the fact that emotions tell us what's important. So we know there's an importance to feeling this way, an importance to being with this person and experiencing life with them. So again, as you become still in practicing this, you awaken into that observer mode. It's kind of like thinking of a cat. A cat will sit there and look at a mouse hole in the wall. It just waits, unblinking, without being distracted. It's attentive and it's really engaged, but still and silent, just waiting. There's a readiness to move in an instant based on a curiosity of when the mouse will reappear. That's how we sit in meditation. It's also how we can walk, drive, or live. Don't just consider the question of life, but feel it in all its perplexity. Some people have said, okay, so what kind of meditation, right? And there are lots of types of meditation. I don't know what the best one is. I just know what works for me. And I would say find out what works for you. Some people sit or lay down, some walk, some practice yogic asanas, and some do Tai Chi. I go for a drive in the country, and that's really where I do my best meditation. So just find the one that works for you, and you'll know it works by the fruit it bears. and practice it as best you can. But don't be too hard on yourself if your mind resists, because let's face it, meditation is all about access to the sublime, to the unmanifest, to things that we would say they're not intense like the experiences in the world are intense. Well, that's what the mind likes. The mind likes, sweet candy or spicy food or loud music or attractive sexual partners or to drive fast or to feel important. It likes all these things that tell us that living here and being in this realm is all about intensity. So in that case, when your mind is, saying, I really need some attention here, I say make a bargain with it. Basically say to it, you give me these 5 minutes and I'll give you 5 minutes after. And then do so. Honor your bargain and give that intensity hungry mind the stimulation it wants. Make a friend of it, and one day it will remind you to go meditate because of what it wants to come after. And so with that, increase your time beyond 5 minutes. Just baby steps are fine. You don't have to do a whole hour up. Just 5 minutes is a win, right? And once you do that, you realize that you're getting the trust of the mind, and it's actually now becoming a good companion. Because as you go home, as your soul goes home, your mind will go to its home as well, its state of super consciousness. And it will have its own appeal in its own way. So this way we work together rather than against, because you can do spirituality probably like with a mind or kind of like without a mind, but you can't do it very easily, if at all, with against a mind. And that's true with a lot of things in our life. Anyway, Lao Tzu in the Tao Te Ching said, to the mind which becomes still, the entire universe will surrender. So that brings me to step 3, number 3, the truth number 3. And that's something I just really wanted to share. I'm not sure where I would best stick this in because it just kind of came as this quantum jump, but it's something that I feel is important. So I just want to share. And that's the difference between linear and non-linear thinking. A lot of people might not have heard of nonlinear thinking, but I guarantee most people have done it. A classic example would be if you've ever tried to catch a frisbee that was coming at you, or catch a ball, like if you were playing baseball and somebody threw it to you. If you have to run across the field and watch that ball until you catch it, or watch that frisbee until you catch it, that's nonlinear thinking, because you're actually doing a lot of calculus in your head, to calculate the trajectory, the force of gravity, how fast you're going, how fast it's going, so that you can be where you're supposed to be when the ball or the frisbee is also there. And that's a pretty nonlinear approach, to be honest. It'd be really hard to say step by step, this is exactly what happened at each moment, because there were so many things happening in parallel. Anyway, a typical usual question might be, who robbed the bank? Linear thinking pursues answers through a step-by-step process, and each part of the process has a gate, sort of like a go, no go, in which you either, at the conclusion of each step, and that tells you to either proceed to the next step or go back around and go through the process again. So obviously, if you're trying to find witnesses, you might go talk to a lot, and you keep talking to them until you get one who gives you something meaningful to go to the next step. So that's, thinking this way is really about the black and white of things. Like I said, somebody either did rob the bank or they didn't rob the bank. Binary thinkers, though, in thinking things have to be this or that, they may miss the opportunity of reaching a compromise. And some patterns of information may remain invisible to them due to the binary, the polarity, the black and white that they're filtering the world through. They're inside the box thinkers. Because think about it, every time you've heard define the problem, that pretty much means define the box and then solve it, usually from inside the box. So what happens to your problem-solving journey if the primary assumptions you've made or procedures break down? You're kind of stuck, right? And that's how most of the world thinks most of the time. I've found it's also impossible to think or process information this way when you're present. Because when you're present, it's a very nonlinear state. It has a very nonlinear approach. I'll explain. The more nonlinear question, you might say, to robbing banks would be, why do people rob banks? Nonlinear thinking brings understanding by promoting thinking and problem solving that extends in what we think of as an outward expansion spiral. It's always changing its perspective. Like if you were walking around a tall, faceted jewel, studying the way the light penetrates it and refracts through it, reflects off of it, knowing that each angle is providing some information about the very thing you're walking around. Anyway, this provides a lot of different starting points, and you can study the problem from those different starting points. And they also provide multiple entry points to the problem that you're trying to solve, rather than just solving things on the surface. Most problems are caused by other problems stacked on top, right? You know, they tend to cascade, they build up, one thing complicates another. There's a dependency of when you're going to get something at the end by when it was sourced at the beginning. Anyway, linear thinking keeps the mind sliding on that surface, kind of going around in a circle, whereas nonlinear thinking goes deeper, spiraling to those different perspectives. And I said, you know, revealing other aspects of consideration. It's a much more evolved way of thinking. It's more natural to think this way when being present. Instead of following the breadcrumbs, you see the whole loaf. Your awareness of it emerges when you realize you aren't using your memory to understand things. You don't need your memory to perceive a complex and dynamic pattern moving in front of you. For instance, you know, like if you were an Inuit and up in Alaska, and the only water you'd seen was pretty much frozen water, to take them to Hawaii and show them a huge wave, they'd be blown away. They understand the ocean, but they have no memory of the wave. But it wouldn't take them very long of playing in the waves for them to understand this is what waves are all about. When you're really present, like I said, it's with no memory of the past or anticipation of the future. That's what being present's all about, right? But it is with your intuition. And here's an example. When we hear someone speak, their words, was there a question? Oh, I'm sorry, I heard something. Maybe it was just someone's mic. When we hear someone speak, their words give us answers, but from their nonverbal communication emerge patterns of meaning. We realize that the short or extended silence between their words is full of information. Add to this their nuance, inflections, and body language, and you have a more complete picture of what they're trying to tell you. And by looking at patterns, you discover the underlying formula that things and events use for their birth, duration, and expiration. DNA, for example. We know it's a thing, we know what it looks like, but it's the information inherent in it that translates into generations of unfolding. That's what makes it really magical. Anyway, you got to disengage from the excitement of the moment to stand there quietly and observe the patterns operating beneath. And you know, I've chewed on this for a long time, and I've gained some new insights into problem solving, varying my approaches to a question, and how intuition needs to be developed and trusted in perceiving deeper truths in any situation. I mean, sometimes it is time to think in a binary mode. Like I said, I'm a project manager. That means I create project plans of steps, and we know when those steps are completed and we can move on, and we know when they're not. So there is a granularity there that requires that kind of binary thinking. But also, when you're creating the plan to saying, what does success look like? What does the end game look like? That could be a very nonlinear exercise, especially when you realize different people may not be aligned on what that success looks like. So then you try to corral everyone into a common agreement. And it's in that in-between space between the polarities in which compromise is found, in which we learn by association. And in the end, it's where we really discover each other. I guess one of the things I became aware of was that of how our intuition is greater than we can know. But said in another way, I've become aware of how our ability to intuit is greater than our ability to know. And that's probably because we can all imagine going to school for a long time. We can all imagine knowing an awful lot. And we can sort of in our gut feel like there must be a limit to what we can know. But intuition is a momentary flash. You look at something and you know it. Like over on the other side, we don't have to ask somebody how they feel about something. We look at them and we know. And we'll talk about that type of communication in just a second. Anyway, I want to share with you something, and it really attributes to this book. In the book, as I wrote it, I started spacing each sentence almost became a one-sentence paragraph. And I realized that, at least for me, it's because so many of the sentences just seem to have a lot of punch to them. And there's a reason I wrote it like this. About a year ago, might have been in February, but basically about a year ago, I went to bed one night. I slept fitfully all night long. You know, as far as talking about, you know, stages of sleep, I don't think I ever got past stage 1. Then around 3 or 4 a.m., my consciousness was presented with several pages, you know, like pages of a book, suspended in air in a nice, very orderly left to right, top to bottom matrix. And I could see there were words on the pages, but either my eyes or the words themselves were out of focus. I understood I was being shown the pages of this book, but I wasn't allowed to read the words because that'd be cheating. I hadn't written them yet. But as I looked at the pages, my perception was switched by an influence outside of me, as if this were a guided exercise, if you will, from the linear seeing of the words, to, even though they were out of focus, to the non-linear pattern-based seeing. And in that viewpoint, I gave more prominence to the rivers of white, as the flowing spaces between the words are called. And then, and again, I wasn't in control of any of this, my mind started flipping back and forth, you know, linear, non-linear, words, space, and I mean, I guess that sort of rapid oscillation was part of the exercise. Not quite sure why, except a point was being driven home. And I was shown that the information is in the words, but the understanding was in the spaces between the words, because the words are you, and the spaces are me. And it is analogous to when people speak and how their nonverbal communication helps us understand the information in their verbal delivery. But even the properly timed pause grants us an extra second or two for the light bulb to go off. I knew I was being told how to write this book, embedding this perspective into the pages, but I couldn't imagine how to quite do that. But that is why most of the book is written in a way that, like I said, is essentially some one-line paragraphs, especially as you move forward through the book. The desire being to give the reader that extra half moment between sentences to chew on what I just said, for the light bulb to go off. And as I typed the book, I instinctively wanted to spread the words out the way I've mentioned, but I wasn't really sure why, until I finished and I realized I was following the blueprint that was given me. So it's just another one of those kind of funny, humbling things. You know, like I said, when some people come back with an, you know, from an NDE, they come back with the ability to foretell the future or talk to deceased loved ones and all that. It's like, I wasn't given any of that. God's grace for me just seems to make me be in the right place at the right time to either avoid something or to be there for something. It's like I haven't proven myself responsible enough to sit there and go, oh yeah, I know that in 5 minutes this is going to happen. It's like, no. Just show up and it happens. So kind of makes every moment a synchronicity, but I'm fine with it. It's good. Truth number 4 is on being authentic. And even atheists can be spiritual. I know that could sound a little paradoxical, but you know, the Buddhists will tell you that that's a big part of their teaching. That basically you don't have to believe in God to escape the cycles of reincarnation. I don't know if that means that they're saying there is no God. It's just saying that, you know, when people ask you, would you rather be respected or loved? Do you think you can really be loved if you're not respected? I don't mean necessarily in terms of a 1-year-old or a 2-year-old. What do they really know about love? But they do know a lot about attachment. Your mom, your dad, you're safe, while they're still figuring out what love is. But anyway, I just wanted to say that because I think if you don't have respect, you really have to wonder if you have love from someone. And I would also say if you want to live spiritually, you definitely need to live authentically. And it may not be that an authentic person is living spiritually, but if it's not that, I would say they're at least preparing the ground. So I wrote in my first book, that after my NDE, I was aware that while God wants to have a relationship with us, he doesn't force us into one. That if you want to ignore him and pretend he doesn't exist, well, your lifespan is so cosmically short that in a moment, in that 80-year lifetime blink of an eye, you'll be back and the truth will be self-evident. If you're right and there is a God, he's not the type who's going to rub your nose in anything. And if you're wrong and there is no God, no one's there to do any rubbing. And I've also felt the truth of you can't row in two boats at once. How many people do we know who are torn in that way, where they are trying to row in two boats at once? They're trying to serve two masters, or they're trying to reach two separate goals, and they wind up just kind of making a mess of it. You've always heard, I mean, you can't please everybody, and when you do, nobody's happy. So I would say if you're talking to God about your choices, you may well say how you want to live a questionable life because you like the sports car, the money, power, and all that stuff. And in such a conversation as I've seen occur in life, God would just say, well, you have free will to do what you want. You can make whatever choices you want to. And if that's really what you want to do, go see how it works out for you. And when you're done, come back. I'm not going anywhere. Because, you know, it's very apparent that until we're satisfied eating the food of this world, then we're probably not going to be happy eating the food of the next. We'll always keep being called back here to the siren songs of the intensity of the experiences this world offers. Anyway, extending that thought, I've come to believe that if you are an atheist and you live your life authentically, then you probably are living it spiritually, or at least, like I say, laying the foundation to do so. You know, there are many people who'll say they believe in God, but they don't live a life, to me, and I'm not judging, but I would say I don't think they live a life that demonstrates the choices or sacrifices you would expect if you were making the same similar declarations. You don't have to look far to find examples, and I'll leave it at that. But what about the people who do own their shortcomings, who don't justify them or dismiss them, and they totally own who they are, warts and all? Like if you, I'm sure you've all known someone. Like if you said, "Man, you're really screwing up here," or you need to get a grip on something, or you need to do better, whatever. I'm sure we've all met one person at least who truly looked at you straight in the eye and said, "You're right. I know." And they don't try to defend their behavior. They don't try to justify anything. They totally embrace their role in this, in that responsibility. And I'm saying, isn't there a humility there that makes such a person worth learning from? And if we can, with our belief in them, breathe a little bit of life into them, they may be able to go out there and talk to people who are also going through these things with an authority that, like, a preacher standing behind a pulpit just can't muster because they've never been down that road. And this is the crux of Alcoholics Anonymous. You get help from within the community. When these people say, well, I have a perspective, it's born of experience. It's not born of just morality. It's really born of something they've seen work and not work. And so that's why I've said I would like to see something like an AA model almost created with the NDE community, that when we're looking for therapeutic resources, maybe it just starts by having a circle of people who've been through what you've been through, both in terms of an NDE and both in terms of the aftermath of losing important relationships after, who have something to say about it. And then the probable minority of people who were able to keep things together and they didn't fall apart, they're going to have something to say as well. So this is something I've talked to IANDS about. It was the topic of my presentation with Diana DeFranco over this last conference. And, it's just a point I'd like to keep making. Anyway, I think that I'd really rather know where you stand and hear your own faults than have them hide behind our love for a shared goal or our dislike of a common enemy, when we tend to let each other slide a little bit more. At least I know where you stand. And I might even feel solidarity with you, even if we're on different paths. And think about this. When you live authentically, you're setting an example for countless people to have the courage to address their own shortcomings and get to work on their growth. Promise you there are more people watching you than you know. So you're helping more than you can imagine. And it just goes back to Socrates saying, man, know thyself. And this is why I've told my kids, don't ask, where's my perfect girlfriend or where's my perfect boyfriend? I said, what you really want to ask is yourself how you need to be loved. Because again, it's about knowing yourself. It's about knowing your flaws and your strengths and saying that it's in this way I need to be loved. And then once you do that, the filters change and people will pop into focus. And in some ways, it may become less about what it is you want and more about what you need. Because when we look at life through the filters we want, we're projecting every desire, if it's boy or girl, or romantic, we're projecting every desire we've had since we were 13 years old. Can we turn the projector off and see the person behind the projection? That's a challenge. But if we sit there and think about what it is we need, we have a much greater chance of turning that projector off, seeing the person as they are in front of us, being still, and saying, let's give this a try. So I would say take that further out. We talked about, what's the purpose in life and what is it that specifically makes you feel happy. One way I'd say is, again, don't ask what it is you should do for a living. Ask, what is it that makes me happy? And what is it that makes me feel fully engaged? What is it that makes me feel connected with people? Don't ask, what is my purpose in life? Ask, what the meaning of life is as you see it. And then back that into the question of what your unique purpose is, given your unique strengths and abilities. I mean, some people are just really great naturals at doing some things, and some people just stink. Some people are natural artists, some people are natural scientists, some people are natural mathematicians or accountants. I mean, we have all these things, and it's this myriad of abilities and ways of looking at the world that we're supposed to be celebrating. Again, back to the thing, celebrate the individual spirit, because this is what makes everything whole, is all these parts. Anyway, so the main question is just finding out what resonates with you and really listen to that inner voice. Pay attention to that. Ask yourself, are there consistent patterns of self-sabotage you engage in? Who brings out the best or the worst in you? Honest self-reflection reveals a way in which we can do better. And that's thinking authentically. And that starts to lay the ground for living authentically. Putting this knowledge into practice at first, I'd say, could really be found in avoiding situations and people that bring out the worst in you. I'm sure we all have at least one emotional hot button. Don't press the button. Don't poke the bear. And I would say try different approaches to avoiding anybody who pushes that button or brings out that worst side of you, the ones that change you from Dr. Jekyll into Mr. Hyde. And to me, it's a good test of authenticity when people talk about saving the world. To take this point full further, some say peace, some say war, some force compliance, a few communicate. But saving the world starts at home, at the kitchen table, on the knee of a parent, or at the feet of a grandparent. And then it grows into living a life in the spirit of service to others, no matter your job or career. Now, that service to others doesn't just necessarily mean working in a soup kitchen. You're a service to others. Like, I'm an IT project manager. I can see the big picture and I can help people get from here to there. That is a service to others. A doctor is providing a service to others. But so is the garbage man. And so are our teachers. I mean, our teachers have been entrusted with the future of humanity. And I think we really need to chew on that long and hard and give them more credit than they're getting. And so anyway, I'm just sort of harping on that for a moment. But again, no matter your job or your career, you can do this. And by doing the things you feel connected to other people with, I would say, looking at those who are less fortunate in one way or the other, whether it's less fortunate in a material way or less fortunate in terms of more than them, look for ways to help. But the best way to lead is to certainly let a lot of people either think it was their idea, but not to pat yourself on the back. It's when we pat ourselves on the back, we now become concerned about ourselves. And that really robs all virtue of anything good we can do. It's best to do it selflessly. Keep the spotlight on everybody else. Celebrate even an inch of their success, and that's going to be worth more to the world than a foot of yours. You were in the ability, you were in the place to be able to help. That's a blessing in and of itself. And I think we just need to consider it that way. So again, share the spotlight whenever possible. No one gets here alone. No one gets there alone. We have a team of people behind us who have helped us get to where we are. Now, I'm not saying, become passive and let people walk all over you. Some fights I know are worth fighting, if not for yourself, then for others. But see the world for what it is, and see relationships for the temporary comforts or distractions they are. And remember, all of us are just passing through. It's been said that when the student is ready, the teacher appears. So how do you know when you're ready? I would say many are those who say, show me the way. But few are those who say, please take me by the hand and lead me because I am blind. Should be clear to anyone that those who only want to be shown the way may still be too proud to be led, and their ego isolates them from the truth. And that's why the world has always been imperfect and always will be. How many people have you seen who need to be bragging about or need to brag about being, the smartest kid in the room? It even happens when they go before a spiritual person asking for guidance or a spiritual apprenticeship. Whether you want to become an apprentice to a master craftsman or a disciple to the Lord himself, I would say save everyone the time of not telling them how much you think you already know. In the grand scheme of things, you know what you know. You don't know what they know, and that's why you're there. Acknowledge that what you think would be cool is really embarrassingly small in comparison, and just save yourself the humiliation. Just ask for what you want. That's it. Simple as that. Don't have to dress it up. Don't have to put a bow on it. Just say, I've had the crap beat out of me in the world, and I want this. This resonates with me. So I guess the end question of that is, what is it we think we know? What is it we yearn to know? And what is it we're dying to know? So I'd run that question by everything. The last truth I want to share then is about letting go itself. When I went to that CT-IANDS conference in Pennsylvania, it was amazing. I'm kind of an introvert. It doesn't mean I don't like people. It's just I'm very picky about the people I hang out with. So, I like all of you. So here we are together. But when I went to this conference, of course, I really didn't know anyone except a couple of them by name. I knew Jack, I knew PMH, I knew a few others, but most people I didn't. But it was really interesting as I walked up to the big convention hall, ready to go in to hear somebody speak. As people were coming out, as we looked at each other, there was this light of recognition. It was just so weird. And it's obvious that it wasn't just me thinking that, because as I looked around the lobby of the hotel, every nook and cranny, every booth in the restaurant, every little sofa or group of seating in the lobby were filling full of people. And some of these people had known each other before. And I think like this one woman walked right out and looked at me and says, we're supposed to talk. I said, okay. So we talked and we stay in touch, and it's just nice and friendly. And it was just really amazing. And I realized then, when two NDEers meet, it's like we don't really need an introduction. It's almost like we recognize someone from like we're from a different planet. We recognize a fellow alien from another planet. And like I said, we recognize something in each other immediately. And in a moment, in a flash, we're in deep and personal conversation, sharing all kinds of intimate details about our life, because we're coming from a different place and sharing that, and we're going to a different place and sharing that. It doesn't even necessarily have so much to do with what it is we're talking about as the act of sharing itself. It's pretty cool. And, so like I say, we're just sort of comparing notes on living life here on Earth. Even if we don't see each other for a long time, once we have that connection, we can still sense that connection, even at a great distance. A lot of times we can know how another person is feeling from that far away once we have that sense of connection, which is pretty cool too. But again, no effort was there to establish the connection or to maintain it. Just being mindful is, being still is, because then we tune out all the static, all the distraction, all of what we think they're feeling, to really intuit, to awaken to how they're feeling. Our mutually resonating tuning forks, they just keep each other going no matter where we are. So as I wrap up, I would say, if someone were to ask me, remember I said, if you don't ask what the purpose of life is and ask what is the meaning of life. So if somebody said, okay, what is the meaning of life? I would say, I have no answer, because you are life. What else can I add? Just walk it, discover for yourself, and realize that you're nothing you were told you are. And when you die, everything you think you are will be left at the door. You are more. You are everything. And when you've asked all your questions, and when there is nothing left to be gained, where all roads end, there God begins. Thank you. That's all I have. If you have any questions or want to talk about anything, here we are. I think everybody's muted except me.
I just unmuted myself, Jim.
Gotcha.
Dana had a question that he put in the chat.
I'm sorry I missed it.
He asked, when one has an NDE, does the ego go with them?
You know, it's interesting. I mean, I guess the question first is, what is ego? Is ego self-awareness? Let's say for a moment, ego isn't just boasting and I'm self-important and all that. If ego is the sense of individuality, which we could say de facto separates us from our universal oneness, losing ourselves in that oneness, then I would say possibly, and it could be this. Think about this. The way I see it is, as we move out of the material world through, I would call them maybe the mental worlds into the spiritual worlds, I think there's a lessening of matter, if you will, and an increase of spirit. And I think as you extend that range, I think we become more and more light and probably less and less of an individual until we do see our oneness with God. We do lose ourselves in that ocean. So until that time, I think you could say ego may well be a continuum. Here, we're very individualistic because we have these finite, discrete bodies. You know, I know where I end and I know where you begin. And then we chase each other around for the rest of our lives trying to be one with each other despite these limitations. Whereas we know over on the other side, these limitations are not so apparent. And we can feel a lot more one with life and one with each other. So in a roundabout way, I think I'm answering your question just to say that I believe it's a continuum and that here it's pretty intense in terms of being individual. And on the other end, it's pretty intense about being one with God and leaving that ego behind.
Tina, are you speaking because you're muted?
John has raised a hand.
Okay. Hello?
Hey.
Hey, how you doing?
John. Hey.
What a wonderful evening. First of all, thank you very, very much. Just a quick question. You're talking about how I think you were referring to at one moment that we are living one of the many infinite possibilities at that one moment.
Yeah.
And I've spoken to Bob Leo, and I haven't seen him in a while. But
he's here. He's here tonight.
Oh, hi, Bob. And we always talk about that sometimes. Why is it, Jim, that we're not aware of our other selves? You know what I'm saying? If we're
let me see if I can help. And again, I don't mean to speak in a roundabout way, but let's try this on. Okay. Remember, all of us were children at one time. Remember when we were a child, and again, to speak as generally and broadly as I can, remember there was maybe this toy we just had to have. My God, we had to have that toy. We would have sold our grandma to get that toy. We get the toy. That toy is everything for about a day. 3 months later, the toy's under the bed gathering dust, right?
Yeah.
The only reason anything in this world has almost like any life to it at all is because we give our attention to it. Like that red shiny sports car, it's the thing as long as we're feeding our attention into it. It's our attention coming back to us through that thing that gives it any life or interest whatsoever. It's the same with how we treat each other. It's the same with, basically anything we imbue our own consciousness with, we put our own attention into. It makes it live for us. And that right there tells you that in order to play the role you've been given in this life, we're all actors reading from a script. We're all in this play together, right? But it's like we really need to pretend this illusion is real. We need to pretend that our ability to control anything that happens to us between the time we wake up and the time we go to bed is real, because it's necessary for the drama. It's necessary for the experience we ourselves chose to come here and have. And I think that's why, in a general sense, we're not sitting here aware of all the other multiverse lives we could be living simultaneously. However, there's another way of saying this. As I've said before, quantum physics has talked about entangled particles, right? That and if you take two entangled particles, even if you separate them out across the universe, the minute you change one, boom, the other one changes, just like that. Everybody's like, wow, time and distance don't exist. Well, they took two entangled particles and they put one into the particle accelerator over in CERN, in Switzerland, and they accelerated it up, toward the speed of light. And as you all may know, the closer you go to the speed of light, time slows down. So what they did, and so like if you and I are standing side by side and I take off on a rocket going near the speed of light and I come back a year later, to me, I might look like I aged a day. You'll have aged a year. So we're now out of sync with each other, right? Imagine we're twin brothers or something. Now we're out of sync. They've done this with entangled particles. They put one in that particle accelerator, took it up near the speed of light, and they literally changed its time frame with relation to its entangled mate. And then when they tweaked one, the other tweaked. Why is that important? Because it's saying this. At the time of the Big Bang, imagine, or let me put it this way. Imagine the beginning of time. Imagine the end of time. It would not be incongruent to what I just said. There are two particles, one at the beginning of time and one at the end of time, that are entangled. And that what you do to one at the beginning of time, you just did to one at the end of time.
Wow.
Because there is no time. It's an illusion. It's just a construct. Like they say, time's just something we created so that everything doesn't happen all at once. Well, it is all happening at once. But it's just like when you download a movie on your computer, you can download a 2-hour movie in 3 minutes, right? But it's all ones and zeros. We can't understand that. We need a sort of a time construct media player to take all of that and then spread it out over time so we can understand it. Within all those ones and zeros is a life-changing story, is everything you need to understand something historical or something about love or each other, or maybe understand how to make a good movie, for which international awards would be given. But we just need the way to process that information. To me, that 2-minute download is kind of like how it is when we receive information over on the side. Boom, we've heard people talk about, I got this download, bam, there it is. And then, we bring it back here, and through the media player of our mind, we peel that onion layer by layer to get down to the middle. So I think, that's kind of what I wanted to say about that, if that helps at all.
It does. Thank you
Jack
so much,
next.
Jim.
Sorry.
Question.
Jack is
I have a
next.
question.
Jack?
Okay, sorry. I had to find my mouse to turn on my voice.
Okay.
Jim, really, you know, you're fantastic. Your metaphors are outstanding. Anyway, thank you very much. In the course of your presentation, you said it was like reading from a script. And if that's true, does that mean that everything is predetermined?
I would say the predetermination has to do with the probabilities that will present themselves before you. And that's where I would say the predetermination is in the different choices that will be presented to you at any given moment. I mean, we can all say that at every moment, like if you're driving your car, generally at any moment, you can decide whether you want to get to where you're going by going straight in the shortest distance, or going left through town because you want to stop at a store, or going right through the country because you just want peace and quiet. So at any given moment, you could go straight, left, or right. Just depends on how you feel at the moment, what your desires are. But those are the choices that present them to you. There's no choice to say, well, I'm going to turn right and all of a sudden I'm in Paris. You know, you can't do that. So I'm saying the predetermination comes in, I think, the probabilities that present themselves to you at every moment. And based on who you are, it's that person who sees the choices before them to select.
Okay, but if you have choices, then it's not predetermined.
I'm saying that's what's predetermined are the choices you see. That's why, remember what I'm saying is, well, here's the other thing. I could say it this way if you want to hear it this way. Predetermination is what happens to you all throughout the day.
Okay.
Free will is how you choose to react to it.
Free will is what?
How you choose to react to it.
Oh, okay. So that's choice.
That's your choice.
Well, if it's choice, then it's not predetermined.
I'm saying both exist.
Okay.
What's predetermined, let's put it this way, what's predetermined is the stimulus. What is free will is your response. And it's that small element of time between the certainty of what has happened to you and the potentiality of how you choose to respond to it. That's where the in-between is. That you are the most powerful you ever will be in that split second, when you're full of potential, you're full of choice, and you can choose which path you want to take and which person you want to become.
Okay.
Well, let's put it this way. If I'm wrong, prove me wrong. Show me you don't. And for those who believe in that it's solely predetermined, show me you don't have a choice.
Okay. Well, it's a conflict in. I mean, if it's, I'm sorry, I'm kind of linear. If it's predetermined, there's no choice. And you're saying that you have both. How is that possible?
Well, let me put it this way. Let's say tomorrow you're driving, forgive me. Let's say someone hit your car, right? You're in a car accident. Someone hit your car, right? You didn't have a choice about that. I mean, once it's happened, you don't have a choice. It's past tense. But you do have a choice on whether you're angry at this person or whether you get out and go up to their window and say, are you okay? Right? If you win the lottery, you have a choice of whether you want to spend it, save it, or donate it. And you do have that choice.
Okay.
And the reason I'm saying you do have a choice is because every moment we're deciding just how much we are attached to this place. And I would say, you know, by the grace of God, at some point we wake up and we live. Here's another example. And again, this is a perspective. Maybe it can't be proven, but this is where I'm coming from. I'll tell it in a small story. One time a person went up to a guru and said to the guru, is it true our destiny is written in our palms? Now that would speak to predetermination, right? And the guru said,
okay.
Yeah, And the guy said, so why do I need you? And the guru said, just because you know what's going to happen tomorrow doesn't mean you can change it. He said, but if you choose to live within the grace of God, that is not written on any palm, that is not tracked by any star. You now live by the whimsy of God, and you never will know what's going to happen next. It's a choice.
Okay.
Question.
Thank you, Jim.
Where, Sumai-san and then John.
Say what?
Sumai-san is next.
I have a question.
Oh, you can be the third one, okay?
All right.
All right.
Hi,
Sue?
Jim. Hi.
Hey, Sue.
Hi, eloquent as usual. So here's my you mentioned when you read the book, before you finish the book, you saw the vision of the book. Sometimes you see the words, other times it's the idea downloaded to your mind.
Yeah.
And also, according to quantum physics, there is no time.
Right.
So that means the book you want to write is already there. You already have it accessible to your mind.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. And I'll say this, it's not just that book. Many of the things I have done, not just written, but done, like when I invented my satellite system, it's as if it already existed. It's like the story already exists, and the story chooses the author or the inventor or the person who's writing music. It's already done, and it's like you're channeling. That's all I can say. In fact, I'll tell you this: I don't remember writing this book. I have no memory of writing this book. I had to speak from notes tonight because I just don't remember writing it. And yet I know I did. But like I said, I wrote it in a month. And then I realized I had written it according to the blueprint I was given. This isn't something I tend to say a lot because I know it just sounds real woo-woo and all that. But I have no other way to explain it.
In fact, this is very inspirational for me because I'm creating a course called Write a Book in Sleep. Because I work with some people to use this process to write books in their meditation. The first experiment I did with this person, I mentioned to the mind, I said, okay, there is no time. The book you want to write is already there. Now see in your mind's eye, just read out to me. So he could see the book cover, the back cover, read out the back cover, and read out every single word of the book. Automatically, by the subconscious mind, the story was not preconceived. And before the first word was written, the story was fully formed. Like the ending was already determined. So that's something that you mentioned your experience, and it's very encouraging for me because I did a few experiments and I found total strangers who never had used meditation, for example, who never had experience, can channel books. The word channeling, for people who are not familiar with spirituality, they might be triggered. So I don't use the word channel.
That's wise. I agree with you.
Yeah, I just say the book is in your subconscious mind. Now we are accessing your subconscious mind.
Yeah,
I don't mention time. I don't say, time doesn't exist, because the thing is, they can do it, but they don't really need to know the metaphysics about the process. They don't need to know that, and they can do it.
I agree with you 100%. It's like, for instance, in my NDE, when I was removing these choices from my future, everybody says, oh, so you saw all these future happenings. And I said, yeah. And I was told the future isn't worth remembering. What I was told was to watch over and over and have faith in the grand design. And so, like I said, when I was looking at the book and the words were out of focus, because like I said, be cheating because I hadn't written them yet. Let's face it, if the book was already written, it was all about, again, you don't need to know the future. You just, today, you need to keep putting one foot in front of the other. Because half the time, think about it, if we knew what the future was going to be, many of us wouldn't even get out of bed that day. But you know what? there are things we got to go do. And that's why, one of my sayings is it's easy to find God. It's hard to become a man or a woman, because it requires doing a lot of things, going through a lot of things that aren't always pleasant, but they are required.
But on the other hand, knowing the end may not help, because there's entrepreneurs who go through so much trouble and eventually get to success. They look back, they said, if you told me 10 years ago, this is what I have to do to achieve what I have achieved today, I would not even embark on the journey because I'll be so scared.
Precisely. And tell me this, is it possible that if you just looked at the end game of what they did and what that target was, that would not justify, let's put it this way, let's say I want to have a PhD because I would just love to have the name doctor, the nomenclature doctor in front of my name. And that's all. Man, there's no way it'd be worth the work to just get that. No way at all. So it's not, I don't think, always just about that end game. It's about the journey along the way. Truly, it is. It really is about how we grew as a result, the people we met. Because my personal belief is, even though we may cure cancer, we may go to Mars, we may figure out world peace, we don't come here for any of the work we do. We come here for the relationships we have. And like they say, who's ever been on their deathbed saying, I wish I spent more time in the office? They're all saying, I wish I hadn't treated my kids so poorly. I wish I hadn't cheated on my wife or my husband. I wish I'd been kinder to people. This is what people are talking about. So why waste your life to your last breath to say that when you could live that way right now? Because so many of us who have loved ones in our lives, one day we're going to be praying for one more minute together. So why waste a day now in anger? Just let it go. Sorry, I went off on a tangent, but I really love what you're doing, Sue. That just sounds fantastic. I want to. When do you think you would start doing this, or are you doing it already?
I am doing it already. I did a pilot study. I ran I brought strangers to Zoom call. I gave this session for free. And in this session, I helped them write their first chapter in sleep. There is a gentleman. The book was a very fascinating thriller.
Mm-hmm.
He never done it before. And he had a great experience. He commented how calm, how peaceful he was. And he was surprised that the book was written itself. He had no prior idea about what he wanted to write. So it was totally in the moment. I helped him write 2 chapters. And there's other people. I found these are total strangers. I feel like I'm getting more comfortable with the process. And it's becoming easier because I was in the moment. I'm not having projections or any preconceived notions. And these people, they all can come up with the book ideas they never premeditated.
Wow.
Yeah, so I'm putting it onto an online course. I just need to record the webinar for it. Everything else is ready.
That's great.
Yeah, case studies, people doing it. Yeah.
Yeah. I look forward to hearing more as it continues. This is great. I know some people have some more questions. By the way, John was asking about where you can get the books. They are on Amazon. Again, I don't mean to plug this. Honestly, I'll tell you guys, I don't care if I sell one book. You don't write a book because you're going to make money. Yeah, just do it because I was told to. One is The In Between, A Trip of a Lifetime. So you can type that into Amazon and it'll pop up.
Well,
and
we'll
the other
have
is
that information on our website.
Yeah, he just asked the Practice in Between Art and Go. Now, we'll say this: when you go on Amazon, there's the paperback. The audio version is me narrating the book. So if you like my voice, there you go. If you don't like my voice, get the paperback.
So Matt Riley is next. Matt.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Jim, thank you for sharing everything with us. We really appreciate it. I had a couple questions. and I apologize if you addressed them in the beginning. I may have missed it, but did you have any in your experience any classic experiences of a near-death experience? So a life review, meeting loved ones, anything of that type of nature.
Yeah, that was a bit of an anomaly. I did not have any of the common hallmarks of that you're citing. Yeah, I did not go through a tunnel. I just sort of teleported there. I did not see dead loved ones other than the voice that was with me the entire time I was alone. But when we talk about the life review, it's interesting because when I was shown this, what I was shown, and you can sort of see it over my shoulder, this picture on the wall, that's where I went. Very Gothic, post-apocalyptic looking landscape.
We can't see it, Jim.
You can
move the camera a little more?
It looks a dark sky and
dark sky, and so it was a total dead land. Like imagine New York City 1,000 years after the meteor hits. Okay. You know, it was like that. However, there was this large, say 4-story tall egg-shaped sculpture there made out of open lattice work, and it basically was full of representations of my future moments, thoughts, words, actions, deeds, all that stuff. And it was when I put my hand inside to see if I could touch them that I felt pain from one. And I realized, I was told that the pain each of these possibilities gave me was based upon the pain if I were to make that decision, if I were to choose them. And I mean, we're all aware that at any time we could choose something that might be very risky or it might bring pain because it's a bad decision. This pain was about this, how this would be to my spiritual detriment. It wasn't just about, oh, you might shaft somebody in business. It'd be the pain and the spiritual detriment it would cause by choosing that. So if you think about it, what are our choices in the future but the fruit of our past? So in this way, it wasn't just a life review to say, hey, I screwed up, I should do better. It was like, boom, you're here, you got a specific amount of time. We don't need to sit here and make you feel bad about the past. We just need you to, using pain as your moral compass, make your choices about your future. This is the actionable intelligence derived from a life review. Think about it. People talk about a life review, right? And they are moved to try to live their lives in a better way. And I'm just saying, and I was given the opportunity to actually see what some of these choices needed to be removed.
So you had the benefit of being able to so did you make let me kind of take a step back. Were you given the choice to come back? Because I'm curious, your fate, so to speak, would have been sealed if you weren't allowed to have this knowledge to then come back to be able to move forward in your life, to recognize the consequences, like you said, your spiritual detriment. I think that's a kind of good way to put it, because it's once we make these choices, and it all kind of ties in together. It's interwoven to what Jack was talking about too, that predeterminism. If we're predetermined versus choices, if we're going to make certain decisions, are we automatically then, is that a kind of a stain on our proverbial soul, so to speak, that we aren't allowed, once we do pass over, there is no going back and able to make any kind of amends for it. But you were, did you get any kind of insight into that in terms of the dynamics of being able to? I
was kicked out. As I was wrapping up what I was doing there, I'll be honest, I saw my future, the representation of these future events were represented as gears, and they're specific gears called a sector gear. It's a partial arc of the gear because there's a beginning and an end and a movement to its movement, which all actions, thoughts, words do. And every time I removed one of these bad gears, all the gears within this egg of destiny, if you will, started recalibrating for the loss of one. And I'll be honest, after what seemed like maybe 10,000 times of doing this, it was starting to feel like torture to watch this thing spin around over and over and over again, seeing these same moments in my future over and over and over again. Finally, I sort of reached a level, I was just ready to quit. I said, I think I can live with this now. And then it said, I said something about, this place, and it said, your being here is an answer to a prayer. And it said, be gentle with everyone as I am gentle with you. And I said, what's gentle about all this? And it said, your being here is an answer to a prayer. And then it said, everything is interconnected. Pay more attention to your relationships. And now the man who fell from the sky is not the same who flew into it. And with that, it booted me out.
Who was the man? Was it you, or is it?
That's
who was the man that fell from the sky? Okay.
Oh, the man who fell from the sky was the guy flying the plane who crashed. Me.
It was you. Okay.
Yeah.
So do you think this person was your spiritual guide?
That's anybody's guess. Let's say it was me in a more evolved form. We could always say, well, you're already one with God. That means if something spiritual talks to you and you think it's God, it really could be you, right? But maybe it is a stage of myself that's higher. But again, if we go higher, we are more one. Who's to say? All I can say is it knew more than I did. It was helping me. It was giving me an opportunity. And I was just very grateful. And by the way, like I said, it was the only act in town. I mean, what was I going to do? Just sit there and stare at a dead city when I got this big egg sitting over here? I'm going to go check it out. Yeah.
And last question. I'm sorry, I don't mean to monopolize, but one last. Did you feel that this experience was more real and intense versus this reality? Because I think you mentioned something. You said something briefly about hallucinations, and I don't know if you were during, your kind of recovery and the medical procedures and all the, the drugs that you're on, if you were hallucinating. But did this experience feel more real than any hallucinations you may have had, drug induced, or B, this reality that we're in right now?
This was definitely the most real experience I've ever had. It was intensely real. And one of the things that was, when I was laying there recuperating in the hospital, it's like it just was playing over and over in my mind. And with each iteration, it was deeper. It was more profound. There was more of this emotional oomph. It was like, and I remember like, what is this thing? And I told my morning nurse about it. When I did, she started crying. And I said, why? And she said, well, I don't want you to die. I said, you're a nurse in a hospital. She goes, yeah, but you're magical. So something was already kind of radiating out about that. But really, further to your point, let's face it, hallucinations are pretty random, right?
Yeah.
Show me a drug you can take that 10 people could take, and they would have the same statistical significance as everybody who has an NDE who does report a tunnel, dead loved ones, a life review, and a big message, seeing angelic beings, right? Nothing. And also, when I say it's kind of random, I've never heard of anybody having an NDE and coming back and saying, God told me to be a serial killer. Yeah. So and also, how do you explain all the blown out light bulbs that follow? Electronic anomalies, even now. And it's weird when you're with other NDEers, it can amplify that effect. I had that happen as well, and I've had it happen as of this past weekend.
Wow.
Okay, Hector.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your patience.
Yeah,
Hector?
it's Willie, not Hector. Willie. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
So here's my question. So here we are struggling to understand what you're saying, and you're struggling to say something and explain it to us, and we're using physical language. In your experience, have you had an experience where you bypassed physical language to understand something, either you alone or you with somebody else?
Yeah. Remember how I was saying like the white space between the words and the letters? To me, and this is why I tell everybody who's had an NDE, if at all possible, narrate your own book. Who can tell your truth better than you? I don't care if this person is a voice actor. I don't care about that. I want the honesty. I want the authenticity of your voice telling your truth. Why? Because there's a vibration. in your words. I mean, we could probably put it up on an oscilloscope. I don't mean to get all airy-fairy on you, but I'm telling you, there's a vibration in the words of someone who is speaking from a place of authority and authenticity that I don't care how great sounding another person's voice is, that seeming authority is counterfeit. It's totally counterfeit. I don't even want to hear it. So, like I said, if I'm a recovering alcoholic, there's no preacher in any pulpit who has anything to say to me who hasn't been down that road himself. Give me a reformed drunk that can say, I know how you feel, not just I appreciate how you feel. So what I'm trying to say there is, even when we talk, there's an exchange of energy between us that has nothing to do with the physical words or my voice box. It has everything to do with almost a soul-to-soul connection.
Thank you.
Rob Sahi, where are you? Rob, are you on?
Yes, I'm on.
Oh, good. Okay.
Hey, Rob.
Hey, how are you, Jim?
Nice to hear your voice.
So, no, I'm agreeing with you, Jim. That place you were at, and like I said, to coin the old cliche, you're never more dead than you are right now. And that one thing my guy's been talking to me said, I asked what happens when the final closure of the universe, when everything's dead. And my guy comes back and says, well, what do you do when you turn off the television?
Exactly.
Well, look at something else. Well, then what's your problem? Okay.
That's a perfect analogy. And I have used that because it does make perfect sense. That honestly, I would put us out there as a pretty good guess that when we die, it's like changing channels on television.
Yeah.
Boom, there's instantly something else in front of you. And guess what? You get so engrossed with what's in front of you, you might not even remember the channel you just changed from, the program you lost interest in. Yeah. That's good. Good, Rob.
Any other questions?
Did Jack have another question? Or
Jim, you're deeply immersed in Eastern philosophy, and I wondered if you could tell me, do Eastern beliefs in predetermination or choice, which do they favor?
It's what I gave you before was I was made to wait 23 years to be initiated into a path that is from the East, from Northern India. And when I got initiated, I said, why the wait? And they said, we don't seek to increase our numbers. Like, we're not here to get numbers. We don't want your money. You don't have to recognize us on the street. You never have to see any of us again. You know what you need to do. And this was back in 93, I guess. And so that was 23 years of waiting in which I became very conversant with the path. And so it's been, another almost 30 years now that I've been on the path. So everything I'm giving you is from that cosmogony, that belief set. And that is, simply put, basically your karma represents what is predetermined. It's your free will to that karma that either collects a karmic credit or it picks up a new karmic debt. The goal of acting without generating karma is to realize that none of us are the doer. We don't do anything. It's our illusion of being doers that's supported by desires, hopes, dreams, fears, things like that, things that attach us to the world. And so, again, what I'm giving you is what comes from the East.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Jim.
Sure.
Any other questions?
It's 8:50. I know you said you wanted to use the last 10 minutes for something. So it looks like we've landed right on the money.
Well, I think Jack had said 5 minutes, but so if there is maybe a last question, anyone?
Well, thank you all. It was really nice to share this with you tonight. I hope it was meaningful in some way, and just
Definitely. Thank you, Jim.
thank you for your
very much.
time. Like I said,
Thank you, Jim.
time is a gift. You know, you might catch up on lost sleep or lost money, but you'll never catch up on lost time. So it is a gift, and I thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you very much. Yeah, you're just an incredible mind and spirit, and I really appreciate. Did you say that the book was available on Amazon?
It is. It sure is. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate that. Anyone else? So, shall we all thank Jim for his? Come on.
Thank you. Thank you.
Jim.
Thank you all. Thank you so much.
Okay. Tina, would someone like to lead the meditation, the healing meditation?
Oh, I thought it was going to be a quiet one.
I'm sorry, who?
Silent one.
Okay.
Just to, by intention.